Now, if you made it to video 2, do us a favor, go down, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're looking to bring you the truth of the situation with these teams, with all the coverage that we have. The more you follow, the more content we'll be able to bring, the further we'll get, and the more we'll serve you. Subscribe, like, thank you. Now, having LaFleur is a huge advantage for Green Bay from a salary cap structure if it was being utilized properly. And this is very, very important for Green Bay, specifically because of who their defensive coordinator is. I like Mike Pettine. I think he's a great defensive coordinator, but you have to understand with Pettine that his defense is a dude-based system. And what is a dude-based defense? It is a system that is phenomenal once you have the pieces in place that can impact the game. You need impact players across the board or it falls apart. And you've seen this in the league. If you're a Green Bay fan, you should look directly over at Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh is also a dude-based system. Now, did they pay wide receivers? No, they do not. Did they pay running backs? No, they do not. They pay offensive linemen and quarterbacks. That's it. They really don't pay tight end either. So you look at the defensive side of the ball. They have Hayward, they have Tuitt, they have Bush, they have Watt, and they have Dupree. That's 5. Green Bay, who do you have? Za'Darius, Kenny, and Preston. That's 3. There's another dude-based defense you want to look at, and that's Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay has Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh, JPP, Barrett, Devin White, and Levante David. 6. Green Bay, we have 3. And when you do not have the pieces in place in a dude-based defense, it becomes insanely fragile to one aspect of the game. In Tampa Bay, they have 6 in the front. They've invested a 2nd-round pick in Carl Davis, a 2nd-round pick in Sean Murphy-Bunting, a 2nd-round pick in Winfield, a 3rd-round pick in Dean, a 3rd-round pick in Edwards, and a 2nd-round pick in Justin Evans, and a 4th-round pick in Jordan Whitehead. That's just their secondary. That's 7 picks, 6 of them on day 2. And they still struggle against the pass in a number of different matchups. When you look at Pittsburgh, Tuitt was a high pick, Hayward was a high pick, Watt was a 1st-rounder, Dupree was a 1st-rounder. They've put a 1st-round pick into Bush, a 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, actually. And on top of that, their secondary, Hayden's paid, Nelson's paid. Terrell Edmonds was a 1st-round pick. Minkah Fitzpatrick required a 1st-round pick. This is a dude-based defense. You have to invest heavily in it, or it's going to break down. You've seen Tampa Bay have struggles against the pass this year. You saw when Devin Bush was out last week that Baltimore was able to run wild against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what does this mean for Green Bay when they have 3 guys in the front? Well, it means you can't stop the run. And Green Bay, have we seen that? There's a very specific reason for this. If you don't have 2 key players on the defensive line and a linebacker who has elite range, you're dead in the water in this scheme. So having LaFleur, allowing them to push their assets towards defense would be a huge benefit, but not when you're using those assets on players like backup running backs and move tight ends, etc., etc. But the other thing about a dude-based defense, you can't afford depth. You cannot afford depth. And look at what Green Bay did in Gutekunst's 2nd draft. With the 12th pick in the draft, they took Rashawn Gary. They had Za'Darius Smith. They had paid him. They had paid Preston Smith. Why do they have Rashawn Gary? With Jeffrey Simmons, Dexter Lawrence, and Christian Wilkins on the board, who fit one of those key places on this defense, they took another linebacker. That's something you can't do. Again, the understanding of the scheme requirements. There is no bench in a dude-based defense. There are 9 players on the field who are considered starters, and there are a number of players who move in with their role and toolbox the other 2 positions. Your slot corner, your middle linebacker who isn't the every down linebacker, and your dime safety. These players kind of mix and match into your rotation, and you can find them relatively cheap. But those nine are very, very important and very, very expensive. And if you have one of those slots in the 9 filled, you can't take another one. Your salary cap simply cannot afford it. The value that's permitted to your team through the draft simply can't afford it. And this is why you see Green Bay's defense break down against the run so bad. You could play a Lancaster and a Kiki and split that role on one of the defensive linemen. But if you don't have Kenny Clark and Jeffrey Simmons, or Kenny Clark and Christian Wilkins, or Kenny Clark and Dexter Lawrence, your front is going to get abused. If you don't have the buck linebacker who can range sideline to sideline, they're going to stretch you, and you're not going to have an answer. That's what San Francisco does to Green Bay. And with the cap constraints that Green Bay is falling into in 2021 and 2022, this means Kevin King is gone. They can only afford to keep Jair. So Kevin King is gone. They don't have the buck linebacker who can range sideline to sideline, and they need a defensive lineman who can do everything, much like Kenny Clark. That is 3 first-round pick value players that Green Bay's defense is sorely missing as of next year. They're missing 2 right now. They need another one when Kevin King moves on as well. That's an incredibly hard task to accomplish without being able to spend money on it. Honestly, they have to move on from Preston Smith. And flatly, I do not like the way Pettine is using Preston Smith in coverage more often, because you don't pay $14 million to a guy you're going to drop in coverage from the outside linebacker position. It's just pointless. If this is the way that things are going to continue going in Green Bay, they have to move on from Mike Pettine, or he needs to change his defensive scheme. Because Gutekunst is not pulling in the value that is necessary to run this defense. Minnesota won last week for that very reason. Now, Dalvin Cook's amazing. Absolutely. But one man should not be able to beat your entire defense. And that's what's happening to Green Bay because they only have 3 pieces in their front 6. This type of scheme is going to run into serious issues and serious matchup clashes if you don't have an elite 9 core. And that is incredibly hard to do if you are not maximizing the value that you have in front of you. And that is clearly not happening in Green Bay. Right now, what you see in Green Bay is an efficiency-based offense and a defense that works towards knocking teams off the field. It sounds like it's a good combination, but in reality it isn't. Because if you have an efficiency-based offense, you want a defense that forces the other team to be efficient. Green Bay's aggressiveness on the defensive side of the ball and the aggressiveness in the scheme actually allows teams to be fairly efficient versus them if they can get some misdirection game going, if they can establish the run game. And the better teams that Green Bay is going to face will do just that. More importantly for Packer fans is that the later you get in the season, and I'm talking about the playoffs, the more likely it becomes that this defense finds a team that just walks up and down the field on it with efficiency, and it caps your season. This will be a team that will consistently win a lot of games with these 2. But when it comes to the important games at the end of the year, they are at a disadvantage. Because if you blitz Green Bay's offense with the talent that they have right now, and you run efficient game against their defense, lights out. That's it. San Francisco did that to Green Bay twice last year. That is one of those teams that can do that. Tampa Bay, at the beginning of the season, I circled them and said the 3 teams in the NFC that have a chance are Tampa Bay, Seattle, and San Francisco. Why? Because Green Bay cannot beat Tampa Bay, and Green Bay cannot beat San Francisco. With the injuries piling up in San Francisco, it is entirely possible that Green Bay can manage themselves through a game and sneak one out. But you can't beat Tampa Bay. Not like this. And that's the point of this. There are some fan bases that want a good team. They're just striving to make the playoffs. Green Bay's done that for ages. The job in Green Bay is to bring home a trophy. That is the only thing fans care about in that town. So the third piece of the 3 keys for Green Bay will be dropping tomorrow. It's not a rosy picture, and I wish it was better, but when you have 3 draft classes under your belt, and I feel positive about the development of Kiki Kingsley. I think John Runyon has a chance to be a good piece, and I believe in Jordan Love. But when you have 3 drafts under your belt, and right now 3 players from those drafts are contributing at a high level, yeah, that's a bad, bad omen. I love you guys. We need you. Stay strong, and I'll see you on the other side.